What is Naidoc Week all about? It seems to happen every year in the first week of July. After a little bit of searching around, I discovered that the letters stand for National Aborigines and Islanders Day Observance Committee. This is interesting. Its history dates back to William Cooper, an Aboriginal Christian who was so convicted about his faith and speaking up on behalf of his people that he wrote a letter to all the churches asking that they set aside one Sunday each year to remember Aborigines and preach about their need for the gospel. Okay, but why should I, as an immigrant, care about this? And what does this have to do with us as Christians now? Let me invite you to join me as I embark on a journey of discovery. So to understand why I'm interested in all this, let's go back a little. I grew up in Malaysia, and when I was 10, I was into competitive sailing. A friend of mine was on his way to joining the national team, until one day we heard that he'd been dropped for one simple reason. They wanted more people who were ethnically Malay. And like me, he was Chinese Malaysian. So that's when I learned that if you're born with the wrong ethnicity, life can be a little bit more difficult. And that's one of the reasons why my family moved to Australia when I was 12 years of age. At my first high school in Australia, I did stand out for being Asian, and I struggled to fit in. At the same time, we were learning about Australia's first people who'd been poorly treated by the European settlers. But honestly, that was a history that didn't really affect me, so why would I care? I had my own issues to think about. This began to change for me when I entered theological college. I learned a bit more about what it meant to be a Christian and why certain things like justice and reconciliation were important, and the significance of Indigenous issues. The problem was, this was an affair that was between two groups of people, the white Australians and the Indigenous Australians. And so we were just left out. So today, as part of my journey of learning and discovery, we're on our way to Dr. Esme Bamblett, the CEO of the Aboriginal Advancement League. But more than that, she is also a Christian pastor. Are you ready to go?
He's well and truly ready.
Yeah. So we talked about so many different things. Esme's work, Aboriginal language, history, culture. And one of the really great things was discovering that we had a shared understanding of how our people groups could sometimes be seen in the eyes of mainstream Australia. Some of the basic stereotypes that were applied to us.
And remember when with COVID-19 and people were really very racist against Chinese people, like every single Chinese person was, tarred with the same brush. Yeah. And that brush is a negative brush most of the time. And then there's the exotic, people see culture as exotic and it's not. Yeah. I like Chinese food. Chinese are all right, I like the food. But that's it, that's as far as we go. So I liken it to an iceberg. So culture is really the whole iceberg, but a lot of people just really see the top of the iceberg and they think they know it, everything. But the part underneath is the most important part. And they're the things you can't see.
Esme and I agreed that culture was really important to all of us, but I wanted to ask her about being a Christian. How does that sit within culture?
So with me, I believe God called me as an Aboriginal woman. He comes first. God comes first, no matter what. So if there's an issue between culture and God, it's God first. I think like all cultures, every culture's got something in there that's ungodly. So our mob have stuff as well as everybody else. And God expects us with all those ungodly things not to take them up. Right. At the same time, I am an Aboriginal woman and culture is embedded. Culture's lived. We don't just have culture. It's not an add-on to us. No. We live culture.
Absolutely. So for me as a Chinese Malaysian, we celebrate Chinese New Year. That's cultural. And as Christians, we have to ask ourselves, what's the good and bad parts within our cultures as we walk with God? It's the same for every culture. But what she said next really hit me.
But one of the things I want to say about our culture too is, like you're an immigrant, right? You're from if you're Chinese, Malaysian, if you want to learn more about your culture, you'd go home and learn, wouldn't you? Or you'd learn it from somebody.
Yeah.
It's not going to disappear, is it?
Hopefully not.
No, right. So if our culture is not passed on and people don't learn it and it disappeared from here, there's nowhere else in the world we can go and get it.
Yeah.
This is it. And this land of Australia speaks about Aboriginal people.
You know, I'd never thought about that. And it explains so much why Aboriginal people talk so much about preserving culture through land and people. This goes part of the way to explaining why I should care about Indigenous issues. There's a lot I hadn't thought about before, a lot that affects me as a more recent immigrant to this land. Dr. Esme put it this way.
So if you came to my house and I let you in, then you just walk past me and you walk into the lounge, you take over the TV and you just leave me outside or whatever, it'd be rude. It'd be considered rude.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing as coming here and not knowing anything about us.
I love this analogy. For many Asian people like me, when someone walks into our houses, we do expect them to take their shoes off. It's a cultural nuance that people, should learn. So I should learn, we should learn, as people who come into this house called Australia, what it means to take our shoes off for the first people of this land. But there's another reason to really care about these Indigenous issues, and that comes right back to our faith. This word, reconciliation.
Reconciliation is a relationship. Relationship with each other. And reconciliation to us is similar to the Bible reconciliation, except that God was in Christ Jesus reconciling the world to himself. This reconciliation goes across this way. And it's what Jesus said about loving each other.
Yeah.
That's what reconciliation is. And to love someone, you have to know them. As Christians, we've got a responsibility to each other. And that responsibility is about finding out all the information we can. That's the reason we need to do it. And that's what reconciliation is.
So as Christians reconciled or put right with God, we also need to put right what's broken in our relationship with others. And this includes our Aboriginal neighbours who have been treated unjustly. Even though a lot of these injustices happened in the past, the effects of them continue today. We need to recognise this and work together toward reconciliation. That's why we should care. If we ignore these problems, we're allowing them to continue. We've been thinking a lot about Jeremiah 29:7 as a church, and it says, "Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile." That speaks so much to me as an immigrant in this land. When we join God at work in the business of reconciliation, when Aboriginal people prosper and thrive, I can see now how all Australian people thrive as a result. I want to be one of those Christians making a positive difference in this unfolding history, like William Cooper, the Aboriginal Christian leader who started the Naidoc movement back in 1937. While it's easy to get overwhelmed by it all, we can be encouraged by even the small steps we take.
I do think that it's good that you care enough to do this. A lot of people wouldn't care enough to do it. The fact that you do care enough to do it tells me that you're really a fair income and that you are interested in finding out. And I think they're the first steps.
I think I'll look back on this as probably quite an influential, a very important and a life-changing moment. The privilege of being able to have this conversation with Dr. Esme. So really glad that you were all able to join me on that journey as well. I guess there's so much more for me to learn, and for every single one of us, there's much more that we can do. Let's encourage each other to keep learning, to keep moving forward, and be part of this process of reconciliation.